About a third of us think that the state pension won't even be there by the time that we retire, and I understand their concern. You can't move for headlines calling it unaffordable, but I think that fear's aimed at the wrong thing. It probably won't be scrapped, but it is being made less generous in three separate ways, and one of them is already starting to bite. So let's look at what's really likely to change and what it means for your plan. Because when I worked out what the state pension's really worth to your savings, even I was surprised. So let's start with the biggest fear of all, that it disappears completely. When you look at what the experts are actually saying, not one of them is calling for the pension to be abolished. The IMF, for example, and they're about as hard-nosed as it gets on public spending, they want to replace the triple lock with something less generous, not to end the pension. Even the most radical reform on the table, and that's from the Tony Blair Institute, still keeps a guaranteed pension of around £12,500 a year. And of course, every main party promised to keep the triple lock at the last election. So I'd say it's extremely likely that the pension survives. But the real question isn't whether it exists, it's how it gets trimmed. And if you want a reason to believe it survives, look at its history. Because the state pension's been reworked over and over again, and it's never once been abolished. Before 1908, there was no state pension at all. Old age was dealt with by the Poor Law, and in practice that meant the workhouse. The whole system assumed you'd work until you couldn't, and there was no real notion of retirement at all. The first state pension arrived in 1908, and here's a number that puts things in perspective. It started at age 70, when life expectancy at birth was only about 41, and around a quarter of people even lived long enough to claim it. Then it was rebuilt after the Beveridge Report in 1948. That was the wartime blueprint for the modern welfare state. It lost its link to earnings in 1980, it gained the triple lock in 2011, and it became today's flat rate system in 2016. So pension reform is the normal state of things, not the exception. Now, to see how it gets trimmed, you need to know how it's funded. And this surprises a lot of people. There's no pot of money with your name on it. The state pension is what's called pay-as-you-go. The national insurance and other taxes that you pay this month go straight out to today's pensioners. It isn't invested for you. The national insurance fund in the middle is really just a really thin buffer, and by law it can only be held in government debt, so it isn't invested for growth. In other words, it works a little bit like a Ponzi scheme. The people getting paid are paid by the people paying in. Now, of course, unlike a Ponzi scheme, the state pension is not a scam. It's backed by the government's power to tax, and it doesn't collapse. But it does have one weak point, and that's demographics. The whole thing depends on there being enough workers for each pensioner, and that ratio is going the wrong way. So over the next 50 years or so, the number of pensioners is set to grow by more than a half, while the working age population grows by only about a tenth. And here's what that does to the fund. According to the Government Actuaries Department, that's the government's own actuaries for the fund, on current projections, the National Insurance Fund's own balance runs down to zero at around 2043. Now, that doesn't mean that the state pension stops. What happens is that the Treasury tops it up out of general taxation, so the pension still gets paid. What breaks is the story that you paid in, and so it's funded, because increasingly it's just paid from general taxes like anything else. And even that top-up has a legal limit that these projections breach in the late 2050s. So the pressure is genuine, but it's a pressure to change the terms, not to switch it off. So if it's not going away, how much is it actually worth to you? And this is the bit that really surprised me. Let me do a rough calculation. A comfortable retirement, according to the latest retirement living standards, costs a single person around £45,000 a year. Now, there's a rough rule of thumb for turning an income into a pot of savings, the 4% rule, and that's where you take the income that you want and multiply by 25. So to fund that whole 45,000 yourself, you'd need a pot of about 1.1 million pounds. But you're not funding all of it yourself because the state pension pays you around 12,000 a year. So your own pot only has to cover the difference, and that brings the number down to roughly £830,000. So look at the gap between those two numbers. The state pension is doing about £300,000 of the heavy lifting. In other words, it's worth roughly £300,000 of savings that you never have to build yourself. Now, I want to stress that's a very rough estimate. It's the 4% rule, which is a guide, not a guarantee, and I'm ignoring tax to keep things simple. But the scale is the point here. This is not small, and it's exactly why the details of how they trim your state pension matter. There's a second thing that the state pension does, and that's really easy to miss, and it's all about timing. So let's say you stop work at 60 and your state pension age is 68. So there's a gap around 8 years where you're funding the whole retirement from your own pot, and that pot is fully exposed to markets. If there's a crash in those years, it really hurts. And those are the years that carry the most risk. There's no state pension yet to fall back on. Then at 68, the state pension kicks in, and what's useful about it is that roughly 12,000 a year is guaranteed, and it doesn't move with the markets. It's a floor. So for the rest of your life, your pot only has to top up the difference. Now that floor is doing the same job as that £300,000 that we just talked about. It's steady money that doesn't care what the stock market's doing. So why all the pressure to trim it? Well, it's expensive, and it's getting more so. The state pension costs about £146 billion every year, and that's up roughly 63% in a decade in cash terms, and it's the second biggest thing that the government spends money on after the NHS. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the government's own forecaster, reckons two things are pushing that cost up in roughly equal measure: the ageing population and the triple lock. Now, in the short run, it's fine. The government actuary says no extra funding's needed before the early 2030s. But over the long run, something has to give. And that's where the government's three options come in. Before we get into what's actually changing, I'd like to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Trading 212. I've been using Trading 212 Stocks and Shares ISA for several years, and I love it. It charges no account fees, no subscription fees, and it offers over 13,000 ETFs and stocks. My favorite Trading 212's feature is pies. You can build a self-contained portfolio inside your Stocks and Shares ISA, set it once, and then rebalance with just one click. You can drip feed into it with regular investing and reinvest dividends automatically. Their ISA is also flexible, which means you can withdraw cash within the tax year and put it back without affecting that year's ISA allowance. As a viewer of PensionCraft, you get a special offer from Trading 212 where you can claim free fractional shares worth up to £100. Just open an account, verify it, fund it, and use my name as the promo code RAMIN, RAMIN, and you'll find a link to that in the description below. Right, option one, and this one's the simplest. They just make you wait longer. The state pension age is already set to rise to 67 by 2028 and to 68 by the mid-2040s. And there's steady pressure to bring that 68 forward. Now, this works from the Treasury's point of view. Each 1 year rise saves roughly 1/3% of national income. But I think there's a fairness problem that comes with it, and it's certainly worth understanding. Poorer people tend to have shorter lives, so when you push back the pension age, they lose proportionally more of it, sometimes all of it. In other words, raising the state pension age hits the people who can least afford it the hardest. Option two is the triple lock, and this is probably the big one. If you're not sure what the triple lock is, it's really simple. Each April, the state pension goes up by the highest of three things: how fast wages are growing, how fast prices are rising, or 2.5%. Whichever's biggest, that's what you get. This year, for example, wages were growing the fastest at 4.8%, so that's the rise. Now that sounds fair enough, but taking the highest every single year adds up. Since 2011, the triple lock has pushed the pension up by around 89%. Now, if it had just followed prices, that'd be 60%. If it had followed earnings, 66%. Now, you might do 89 minus 66 and think the gap's 23%, but that's measured against the pension back in 2011. Compared with what it would be under earnings growth today, which is the fairer test, I think, it's £241 per week rather than 211, or 14% higher. And in total cost, that's roughly £12 billion a year more than an earnings link would cost. So what's likely to happen? Most of the experts, including the IFS, agree on the fix: link the pension to average earnings, but with a floor so it never rises by less than inflation. So it keeps pace with wages over time without the ratchet of always grabbing the highest number. Now that's the smoothed earnings link that Australia uses. And politically, I'd say that arrives after the next election, not before, because the current government's promised to keep the triple lock for this parliament. Option 3 is the subtle one, and it's already happening under the radar. So rather than one big cut that everyone would notice, you tighten the rules at the edges. For example, from April 2026, if you're living abroad and topping up your national insurance, the cheap rate's gone. Around 46,000 people now pay a higher rate, roughly £760 more every year. There's a new rule that you need 10 years in the UK to buy in from abroad, where it used to be 3. Then there are the frozen pensions. Over 500,000 British pensioners living in the wrong countries whose state pension never goes up at all and just stays frozen at the level that it started. And some parts of the pension, like the older additional pension, don't even get the triple lock at all. Now, none of these makes a headline, but add them up and it's the same direction of travel. Trim the edges, save a bit, and hope nobody notices. Now, is this just a British mess? Well, not really, and I think other countries are quite instructive here. Let's take Denmark. They've linked their pension age to life expectancy by a formula, so it just rises automatically, and it's heading for 70 by 2040. There's no drama and no annual fight. Compare that with France, which tried to raise its pension age from 62 to 64 the hard way, forcing it through Parliament without a vote, and they got months of strikes for it, and it's now busy suspending the whole thing. So the lesson I take is that the countries that adjust by a formula pay a much smaller political price than the ones that adjust by announcement. And some countries go even further. They actually invest the money in a national fund instead of our pay-as-you-go system. Ireland and Chile are building exactly that kind of funded system right now. There's even a proposal for Britain, the Tony Blair Institute's Lifespan Fund, which reckons it could hold pension costs at around 5.5% of national income instead of nearly 8%. So the tools exist. It's really a question of political will and bravery. So what does all this mean for you and your own plan? Here's how I treat it. I do count the state pension. I think it'll be there, and ignoring it would mean massively over-saving. But I stress test it. I assume I get it a bit later than the current timetable, and I assume that the uprating is a bit less generous than the triple lock. Maybe an earnings link or inflation link rather than the highest of 3. And what's reassuring is that this middle path barely moves the needle. The IFS reckons a middle earner needs to save around 10% of their salary if the triple lock goes, versus about 8% if it stays. So we're talking about a percentage point or two, not a disaster. The panic scenario, the pension vanishing, and you having to find that extra £300,000 yourself, that's the one that's very unlikely to happen. The realistic one costs you a little more each month and it's very manageable if you plan for it. So in conclusion, will the state pension exist when you retire? I think almost certainly yes, but it'll probably come a little later, it'll probably be a little less generous, and around the edges, it's being trimmed already. My own view is that the sensible thing isn't to panic, and it isn't to ignore it, it's to count on it, but plan as if it'll be a little bit less than you're promised. That way you're covered either way. If you'd like to go deeper on building a retirement that doesn't lean too heavily on the state, there's a card on screen for that. And tell me in the comments, what do you think is going to happen to the state pension? How will we make it more affordable? And, as always, thank you for listening.